General Hospital will reveal exciting events in the next 2 weeks from May 12 to 23, 2025. First, during the week of May 12 to May 16. While the atmosphere at Port Charles University was still thick with tension from the final rounds of selection for Professor Henry's research assistant position, Emma entered the competition with absolute confidence in herself and the academic effort she had poured into her work over the past several months. She had spent nearly all of her time in the library, the lab, and even late nights alone in her dorm room, meticulously crafting her research. Every hope she had rested on a single USB drive that held her final manuscript and all of her crucial experimental data, something she considered her golden ticket to a prestigious academic career under Henry's guidance. But fate did not stand on Emma's side. On what seemed like an ordinary morning, as she prepared to submit her materials to the professor's office, the USB suddenly failed to read. All her critical data had been corrupted beyond recovery. Emma nearly collapsed from the shock as she realized that all of her hard work was on the verge of being destroyed due to a small but devastating technical malfunction. In a panic, she rushed to the campus IT center, desperate to retrieve the files, but every recovery attempt failed. Time was running out, and she had no other backups. Ironically, Jocelyn, who had quietly observed Emma for some time, somehow ended up with a printed draft from a previous seminar presentation that Emma had shared as a reference handout. While Emma wrestled with despair, Jocelyn calmly edited the paper just enough to give it a personal touch and submitted it to Henry. The professor, deeply impressed by the clarity of the thesis and the seemingly solid data, quickly declared it the standout submission of the selection process. As Emma sat alone in the research wing's hallway, trying to hold back tears and calling her mother for advice, an internal meeting took place in Henry's office. He announced the winner of the assistantship and praised the exceptional analytical mind behind the work, Jocelyn. The room filled with congratulations for the confident blonde who now stepped into the role Emma had dreamed of. Emma had no idea that it was her own research, the fruit of a grueling summer, that someone else had claimed. The truth remained hidden. But a deep sense of emptiness and suspicion stirred within Emma. Something felt wrong, as though she had been robbed by someone standing right next to her. In the following days, as Jocelyn began her duties under Henry's mentorship, Emma realized she couldn't let it end this way. Though she had no solid proof yet, she quietly began to investigate. Determined to trace every step, every seminar file, every printout and email she had sent, hoping to uncover the truth. At the research lab, Jocelyn continued to enjoy Henry's favor, with the professor placing immense trust in her abilities. Other students began to take notice of this rising star, which only made Emma feel more alienated. But she didn't give up. Inheriting both her parents' tenacity and belief in justice, Emma knew that if the truth remained buried, it wouldn't just destroy her career, it would corrode the very academic system she had always respected. As her silent investigation progressed, Emma discovered disturbing overlaps between her original work and the paper Jocelyn had submitted. Analytical approaches, data structures, even specific graphs that were uniquely hers now appeared under someone else's name. A flicker of hope reignited when she located an autosaved email from the university system containing a draft of her research that she had once sent to herself for formatting checks, possibly the only remaining proof of her intellectual ownership. Now Emma stood at a crossroads: remain silent to preserve harmony in a highly competitive academic environment, or take the risk of a long, contentious battle to defend her work and expose the truth, even if it meant losing all future opportunities at the university. But guided by her belief in fairness, she began drafting a comprehensive report with attached evidence, addressed to the University Research Council. She knew that if she didn't stand up for herself now, no one would in the future. Meanwhile, Jocelyn began to feel the weight of guilt pressing down on her as Emma's watchful gaze and subtle tension grew heavier each day. Though she had secured the prestigious position, an invisible burden clung to her, the fear that the truth would eventually come to light and tear down everything she had gained in an instant. Would Emma succeed in reclaiming her name and academic integrity? Would Jocelyn continue the charade, or would her conscience eventually force a confession? And Henry, the man seen as a beacon of academic justice, how would he respond upon discovering he had chosen the wrong student? The answers to these questions lay just ahead, in the stormy days to come at Port Charles University. Second, the decision to capitulate to the deal that Jens Sidwell was pressing Sonny Corinthos to accept would not unfold quietly. Instead, it would ignite a firestorm of resistance, particularly from Jason Morgan, whose loyalty to Sonny had always been rooted in principle and strategy, not submission. Jason, never one to tolerate compromise when it involved vulnerability, saw Jen's proposal not as a truce but as a calculated ambush disguised as diplomacy. The very thought that Sonny might entertain such an arrangement left Jason feeling betrayed, as if the years of mutual understanding between them were dissolving into a dangerous fog of desperation. Carly, too, would soon enter the fray with her own battle lines drawn. Aligning herself with her most trusted ally, Jason, and ready to engage in strategic warfare to protect what little semblance of order remained in their fractured world. Yet Carly was not simply reacting to external threats. She was also on the offensive, particularly against Lulu, whose obsessive pursuit of legal guardianship over Brooke Lynn Quartermaine had escalated from emotional manipulation into near-lethal recklessness. Carly's patience had reached its limit. Lulu's mission, cloaked in maternal righteousness, had begun to take on a darker, more dangerous tone. Carly had watched in horror as Lulu's fixation turned into a vendetta. Disregarding the psychological well-being of Brooke Lynn and putting the lives of others at stake in her crusade. To Carly, it was no longer about custody, it was about control. And the path Lulu had chosen was littered with collateral damage. Her accusations weren't subtle. Carly openly blamed Lulu for orchestrating a scenario that could soon cost lives if left unchecked. As Carly moved to block Lulu's influence and contain the fallout, Drew Kane operated in the background, drawing closer to uncovering the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared him for months. Though he had already discovered that Portia Robinson had some hand in his drugging, the full scope of her involvement remained murky. There were questions that lingered, unanswered, gnawing at the edges of his mind, questions that inevitably led him toward Nina Reeves. Her name had surfaced too many times in whispers and silences, in glances and sidelong evasions. Drew wasn't yet sure whether she had actively participated in the conspiracy, but the more he dug, the more he realized she was far too close to too many of the players involved. It remained unclear whether Drew's inevitable discovery would tie Nina directly to the incident or merely to a larger scheme, one perhaps orchestrated by Jacinda, whose shadow loomed larger with each passing day. Nevertheless, Nina found herself increasingly cornered. She knew that Drew's momentum was building and that secrets she had fought to keep buried were inching toward exposure. In a desperate gamble, she turned to Carly, not for redemption, but for protection. She hoped, against all logic, that Carly might cover for her one last time, might bury Nina's role in Jacinda's conspiracy beneath layers of half-truths and mutual benefit. But trust had become a dwindling currency in Port Charles, and Carly was growing poorer by the day. Her instinct told her Nina wasn't coming to her out of friendship or remorse, but out of fear, raw, calculating fear. That same instinct told her to be cautious, to use Nina's desperation as leverage rather than granting her sanctuary. Nina's request was not a plea for forgiveness, it was a proposition, complicity in exchange for silence. And Carly, ever the strategist, wasn't sure she could afford to buy what Nina was selling. Meanwhile, Portia's erratic behavior had not gone unnoticed by Curtis Ashford. The woman he loved was unraveling at the seams, unable to hide the emotional tremors that pulsed just beneath the surface. Her interactions with Drew were tense, uneven, and filled with barely veiled panic. Curtis, observant and increasingly skeptical, began to piece together a timeline that no longer aligned with Portia's carefully constructed alibis. The dots began to connect in ways that disturbed him more with each realization. Unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, he confronted Portia, not with accusations, but with questions sharp enough to draw blood. The answers she gave were vague, defensive, and filled with omissions. The woman he once trusted with his life now seemed like a stranger clutching a crumbling facade. With no resolution and even more questions gnawing at him, Curtis turned to the one person who had always told him the truth, no matter how painful, Jordan Ashford. In the quiet of a dimly lit bar, Curtis laid everything bare. The timeline inconsistencies. The strange meetings. The lies about where Portia had been on the night Drew was drugged. He needed clarity, and he needed someone who wouldn't let emotions cloud the facts. Jordan listened in silence, her eyes narrowing as she began forming a picture in her mind of a much larger scheme than anyone had suspected. It wasn't just about Drew. It wasn't just about Portia. And it wasn't just about Jacinda. The web extended further, wrapping around every corner of Port Charles politics and personal vendettas, threatening to expose the town's most guarded secrets in a single unraveling thread. As the days progressed, tensions would rise. Carly's resolve would be tested not only by Nina's duplicity but also by the deepening rift between her and Sonny. A divide driven by the moral compromises he seemed more willing to make with each passing crisis. Jason would have to choose between protecting Sonny's legacy and preserving his own code of honor. Drew's investigation would drag more names into the light, and Curtis's suspicion would ignite a chain reaction that could shatter his marriage and send shockwaves through the Ashford family. And through it all, one truth would become increasingly clear: Port Charles was standing on a precipice, and the next step any of them took might plunge them all into chaos. Third, Willow was about to face an emotional collapse unlike anything she had ever experienced. What she had believed to be a personal rejection from Michael during her trip to Baden-Baden was, in truth, a carefully orchestrated lie. After traveling across the world to reconnect with him, she was crushed to learn that he supposedly refused to see her. The heartbreak was unbearable. But what made it worse was the belief that Michael had completely shut the door on any hope for healing. In reality, Drew had bribed a clinic employee to deliver that false message, ensuring that Willow would believe she had been rejected. His reasons remained unclear, whether driven by control, resentment, or misguided protection, but the result was devastating for Willow, who now faced the harsh reality that someone she trusted had deliberately kept her from the man she loved. Jason, sensing that something didn't add up, took it upon himself to investigate. Michael had been just as confused when he learned Willow had tried to visit him, and the inconsistencies in their accounts raised red flags for Jason, who had always trusted his instincts. Digging deeper, he discovered that Michael had never received any messages about Willow's presence and had not turned her away. Tracing the events back to the clinic, Jason unearthed the bribery trail that led directly to Drew. The betrayal was staggering. Willow, upon learning the truth, was left speechless and torn between anger and sorrow. Her emotions were raw. Her pain now compounded by the knowledge that Drew, once a friend, had manipulated her vulnerability for reasons she still didn't understand. At the same time, Sonny found a new connection forming with Gio, whose emotional wounds ran deep after being verbally attacked by Dante. Gio had been spiraling, uncertain of where he stood or who truly cared about him. Sonny, despite recovering from surgery and needing rest, put aside his own struggles to offer comfort to the troubled young man. In Sonny, Gio found a calm presence who didn't demand answers, just offered understanding. The two men formed a quiet but powerful bond, with Sonny becoming something of a mentor, helping Gio begin to reclaim his self-worth. Their connection reminded Sonny of his own role in the lives of those who looked up to him, especially now, when strength was needed more than ever. Elsewhere, Sonny reached out to Willow for a personal conversation, recognizing her pain and offering the type of comfort only someone with lived experience could provide. As they sat together, Sonny's quiet support became a salve to Willow's open wounds. She finally began to process the full weight of the betrayal and started to think about how she might confront Drew, not out of vengeance, but in defense of her dignity. Sonny, meanwhile, juggled this emotional support with his own recovery, refusing to slow down even when his body demanded it. His heart, heavy with the burdens of everyone relying on him, refused to rest. Meanwhile, Alexis found herself locked in a strategic showdown with Rick Lansing. Believing she could outmaneuver him and gain an upper hand in their legal dealings, she miscalculated and was swiftly outplayed. Rick had come prepared, armed with knowledge of her previous missteps and willing to expose them if necessary. Alexis, backed into a corner, watched her power slip through her fingers. In the shadows, Ava observed everything. Still deeply involved in a covert blackmail operation connected to both Rick and Alexis, Ava maneuvered carefully, doing everything possible to maintain control and ensure her secrets remained buried. Her influence, though unseen by many, was far-reaching and poised to reshape the battlefield entirely. Finally, Lulu's obsessive quest to uncover the truth about Joe's parentage brought her to a discovery that would change everything. After months of research, interviews, and quiet digging, she finally obtained the proof she needed. Gio was the biological son of Brooke Lynn and Dante. The revelation would shatter the fragile peace holding both families together. Brooke Lynn's decision to hide the truth, Dante's unwitting abandonment of his own child, and the emotional fallout for Gio, all of it was about to erupt. With this truth in her hands, Lulu had to decide whether to expose it for justice or consider the consequences of tearing lives apart. In Port Charles, every truth came with a cost, and this one would be no different. Finally, during the week of May 19th to May 23rd, Lulu would find herself grappling with the burden of truth, a secret so explosive it could alter the course of multiple lives in Port Charles. Holding the evidence that confirmed Gio was indeed the biological son of Brooke Lynn and Dante, Lulu faced an impossible decision: should she reveal what she knew and risk imploding two families, or keep it hidden in order to preserve a fragile peace? The timing of her moral dilemma couldn't have been more precarious, as the town buzzed with anticipation for the highly awaited nurses' ball. Scheduled to begin on May 20th, the event promised glamour, celebration, and drama, both on stage and off. If Lulu acted on her information, the shockwaves might overshadow even the most dazzling performances of the night. Fans of General Hospital could look forward to a major public appearance from Dante and Brooke Lynn during the event, especially given the growing tension surrounding them. As they prepared to walk the red carpet, looking every bit the polished public figures they were expected to be, an undercurrent of secrecy hummed beneath their smiles. Dante, still unaware of the truth Lulu held, remained caught between his professional duties and the personal ghosts that refused to stay buried. Brooke Lynn, meanwhile, wore her designer gown like armor, her confidence masking the storm she sensed was approaching. The red carpet would be filled with flirtatious glances, ambiguous pairings, and speculative interviews, but nothing would be as potentially disruptive as the truth Lulu carried in her heart. Adding to the evening's confusion, Cody Bell and Molly Lansing Davis found themselves at the center of a mistaken identity whirlwind. Misinterpreted glances and coincidental seating arrangements would quickly spiral into wild assumptions about a romantic relationship between them. What started as casual conversation at the pre-gala celebration morphed into gossip-fueled whispers that spread like wildfire through the crowd. Despite both Cody and Molly's insistence that there was nothing between them, the rumors would cast a humorous but disruptive cloud over the festivities. Their unexpected pairing would steal the spotlight temporarily, though perhaps Lulu, with her bombshell revelation in hand, would shift that spotlight entirely if she chose to act. Meanwhile, the stage preparations buzzed with excitement and uncertainty as Kai Taylor was scheduled to perform alongside Trina Robinson. Their duet had been highly anticipated, not just for its artistic value but for the emotional weight it carried, the culmination of a relationship forged through trials and triumphs. However, Kai's health remained a looming question mark. Although he had miraculously avoided paralysis after his risky surgery, the aftermath had left him more physically fragile than anyone had realized. On the outside, Kai maintained his calm demeanor, insisting he was strong enough to perform. But behind closed doors, the pain was overwhelming, casting doubt on his ability to stand, let alone sing. The recovery process had taken a darker toll on Kai than expected. His moments of silence grew more frequent, his reassurances more hollow. Regret began to set in, not just about the surgery itself, but about the promise he had made to Trina to stand beside her during the nurses' ball performance. That promise now hung heavy over him. Not only as a commitment to her but as a test of his own self-worth. As the day of the performance neared, the pressure mounted. Kai's fear of failure began to eclipse the physical pain, leaving him uncertain whether he could keep up the illusion of strength any longer. Trina, ever intuitive, sensed the shift in Kai's demeanor long before he said a word. Her excitement for the ball slowly gave way to concern, her thoughts consumed not with dresses or song choices, but with Kai's well-being. The thought of him pushing through pain just to meet expectations tore at her heart. She began to wonder if the performance was worth the cost, or if she needed to step in and protect him from himself. As Kai's condition unfolded in real time, Trina prepared herself for the possibility that their moment in the spotlight might not happen after all. Yet more than that. She braced for the emotional fallout, knowing that behind Kai's silence lay a storm waiting to break. The nurses' ball promised unforgettable moments, but for Trina and Kai, it could also mark a painful turning point in both their personal and emotional journeys.